Heron first saw that forest on a night that seemed ordinary to everyone else. On the outside, it was just another quiet night. But inside her heart, it was not ordinary at all. That day at school, the things her friends said, the awkward conversations, the words she wanted to say but swallowed back, everything was tangled up inside her chest like a small stone rolling around and never stopping. Her room was silent. On the desk, notebooks and pencils were scattered in a messy pile. Outside the window, the winter wind brushed against the glass with a soft sound. Heron pulled the blanket over her head, then pushed it down again, then turned to the other side. No matter how she lay down, sleep did not come easily. I don't know why, but I just feel like I'm such a nobody. Her voice was very small, but in the quiet room it sounded strangely loud. It felt like the words hit the wall and came back to her. Heron herself did not like those words, but she also knew they were honest. She wanted to tell someone how she felt, but telling someone meant she needed a kind of courage she did not think she had. After turning over again and again, Heron finally fell into a deep sleep. And that was when it happened. In the darkness, a small light appeared. It was purple, small, quiet, and warm. The light moved slowly, as if it were alive. It floated in front of Heron's sleeping face for a moment, then gently drifted toward the door and out of the room, as if she were following that light. Heron's body suddenly felt lighter. It was like someone was lifting her up very softly. Heron opened her eyes, and she stopped breathing for a second. In front of her was a place she could never see in the real world. The sky stretched out endlessly, and the stars were so close it felt like she could touch them if she reached out her hand. Below that sky there was a forest. The trees had silver leaves, and the ground glowed with a soft blue light, moving gently as if it were breathing. Where am I? Heron slowly looked around. There was no wind, but the leaves on the trees rustled softly. And then she heard a voice. You finally came. Heron jumped and turned around. There was a rabbit standing there. But it was not a normal rabbit. The rabbit was made of shadow. Its outline was clear, but its whole body flowed like darkness. Only its eyes shone like tiny stars. Who are you? Heron stepped back as she asked. The rabbit bowed its head slightly. I'm Lumo. I'm the guide of this forest. And you are the one we've been waiting for. You've been waiting for me? Yes. The Star Forest called you. Heron could not understand. She had never thought of herself as special. In fact, it was the opposite. Maybe you got the wrong person. I'm nobody. Lumo looked at her quietly. Its eyes were strangely warm. The forest doesn't call nobody. This place is the Star Forest, where children's feelings become stars. And right now, this forest is in great danger. Heron listened closely. The light of the forest is fading. New stars are not being born. The trees are losing their color. If this continues, all the stars in the night sky will disappear. Heron looked up at the sky. The stars that had been shining a moment ago now seemed to flicker weakly. Why is this happening? Lumo was silent for a moment. Its shadowy body trembled slightly, as if the answer itself was heavy. Someone is stealing feelings. They are taking color from children's hearts. When feelings disappear, stars cannot be born. Heron felt her heart sink. For some reason, those words did not feel like someone else's story. Then, what am I supposed to do here? Lumo pointed at the ground under Heron's feet. Only then did she notice it. The ground where she was standing was glowing faintly. You are connected to this forest. Your feelings reached this place. That's why you were called. My feelings? Yes. You thought of yourself as a kid who is nothing. Those words made a deep shadow in your heart. That shadow reached this forest too. Heron swallowed hard. It felt like someone had looked straight into her heart. But don't worry. If there is a shadow, it means there is also light. Lumo smiled softly. Heron, you are the one who can save this forest. Heron shook her head. I can't do something like that. I'm not brave. I'm not special. Lumo gently took her hand. Even though it was made of shadow, the touch was warm. Brave people are not the only ones who start a journey. When someone who is scared takes one step forward, that is real courage. Those words sink deep into Heron's heart. They did not feel like simple comfort. Lumo turned and pointed toward the center of the forest. Come on. We have to go to the heart of the forest, the Garden of Colors. That's where everything started. Heron took a slow breath. Then she nodded. Okay, let's go. At that moment, a path opened in the forest. The shining leaves moved aside, and a silver road appeared. Heron walked forward with Lumo by her side. She was still scared, but somewhere inside, a small warmth began to grow. It felt like maybe she really was meant to be here. And just like that, Heron's long journey began. As Heron and Lumo walked deeper into the forest, the air slowly began to change. At first, the trees still had a soft silver glow, and the ground shone with a gentle blue light. But the farther they went, the more the colors faded. The silver leaves turned gray. The gray turned dull and dusty. And soon the trees looked as if someone had erased their colors with a giant eraser. Heron hugged her arms around herself. Lumo, something feels strange here. Lumo nodded. The closer we get to the Garden of Colors, the more clearly you can see the forest sickness. When feelings disappear, the forest loses its color. Heron looked down at the ground. The soft, glowing soil she had walked on before was gone. Now the earth was cracked like old paper, and thin gray mist leaked out from the cracks. The mist felt cold and dry, like a place where nothing could grow. It feels like the air is heavy, Heron whispered. Because this place has lost its feelings, Lumo said softly. When feelings fade, warmth fades too. The forest grew darker as they walked. The trees became taller and thinner, their branches stretching up like long, tired arms. The leaves were gone, and the branches shook even though there was no wind. There were no birds, no rustling leaves, no sound of water, nothing. The silence was so deep that Heron felt like she shouldn't even breathe too loudly. Why is it so quiet? She asked. It's the sign that the Garden of Colors is dying, Lumo answered. Just then, the forest opened up, and Heron froze. They had reached the Garden of Colors, but there was not a single color left. The garden looked like a world inside an old black and white photo. The flowers had turned to gray dust. The trees were nothing but dark shapes. The ground was cracked and dry, and in the center of the garden floated a huge crystal sphere. Heron stepped closer. The sphere was supposed to shine with all the colors of the forest, but now it was completely gray. No light, no warmth, no life. This is, Heron whispered. The heart of feelings, Lumo said. All the feelings of children gather here. This place is the source of the forest's light, but now it's empty. Heron reached out and touched the sphere. The moment her fingers brushed it, a sharp cold ran up her arm. It's freezing. When feelings disappear, everything becomes cold, Lumo said quietly. Heron stared at the sphere. Can it be fixed? Yes, Lumo said, but only if we bring back the 3 lost feelings. 3 feelings? Courage, joy, and sadness. Heron repeated the words in her mind.
Courage, joy,
sadness. They were simple words, but each one felt heavy in her chest. Why do I have to find them? Heron asked. Why me? Lumo looked at her with gentle eyes. Because you lost them once too, and because you want to find them again. Heron's breath caught in her throat. She couldn't deny it. She had lost those feelings. She had pushed them away, hidden them, pretended she didn't need them. Lumo pointed toward the north side of the garden. The first feeling is courage. The flame of courage is in the Shadow Canyon. A creature made from fear guards it. Heron's eyes widened. A creature? Fear takes shape there, Lumo said. It may be bigger and scarier than you imagine. Heron swallowed hard. Her hands trembled a little. Lumo, I don't know if I can do this. Lumo took her hand again. The shadowy hand was warm, just like before. You don't have to be sure. You just have to take one step. Courage is not something you have before you start. It's something you find while you walk. Heron looked at the gray garden around her, the dead flowers, the silent trees, the cold, empty sphere. If she did nothing, this place would disappear forever. Something inside her chest moved. A small spark. A tiny warmth. Okay, she said quietly. I'll go. Lumos smiled. Then let's begin. A cold wind blew from the north. The gray dust on the ground lifted into the air, and a narrow path opened. The path was dark.
Deep.
Endless. But Heron stepped forward. Her heart was still shaking, but her feet were steady, and that small spark inside her chest glowed a little brighter. The path to the north felt different from the rest of the forest. With every step Heron took, the air grew colder. At first, she thought it was just the temperature changing, but soon she realized it was something else. A cold that came from inside the forest itself. The trees around her slowly lost their glow. Their silver leaves turned dark, and the soft blue light on the ground faded away. The deeper they went, the taller the trees became, their branches stretching high like long, thin arms trying to block the sky. Heron, Lumos said quietly, we're getting close. Heron hugged her arms. Why does it feel so dark here? This is the Shadow Canyon, Lumo answered. It's where fear gathers. All the fears children try to hide come here. They sink into the ground, fill the air, and sometimes they take shape. Heron's heart tightened. Take shape? You mean like a real thing? Lumo didn't answer right away. Its shadowy body trembled slightly. You'll see soon. The forest path ended suddenly, and huge stone walls rose in front of them. The walls were rough and cracked, like the remains of an ancient fortress. Between the walls was a narrow opening, the entrance to the canyon. The entrance looked like a giant mouth. Cold air flowed out of it, touching Heron's skin like icy fingers. She stepped back without meaning to. Lumo, do we really have to go in there? Yes, Lumo said softly. The flame of courage is deep inside. You can only find it if you face your fear. Heron stared into the darkness. She couldn't see anything inside. It felt endless. I'm scared. That's okay, Lumo said. Being scared means you can be brave. Heron took a shaky breath. Then she stepped into the canyon. Inside, the darkness was thick. There was almost no light. The ground was wet, and every step made a soft splash. The sound echoed through the canyon, bouncing off the stone walls. It's so quiet, Heron whispered. It's not quiet, Lumo said. You just haven't heard the sounds yet. What sounds? Lumo didn't answer. And then, Heron heard it. A low, sad sound, like someone crying far away. Then another sound, a whisper, a voice. You can't do it. You're weak. What if they hate you? What if you fail? Heron froze. That voice, that's my voice. Lumo nodded. Fear always starts inside you. Here, it becomes sound. The whispers grew louder. They mixed with the crying, the echoes, the shaking of the canyon walls. Then,
Boom.
a heavy step. The ground shook.
Boom.
Another step. Dust fell from the walls. Heron grabbed Lumo's arm. What is that? Lumo stepped in front of her. It's coming. The monster that grows by eating fear. A huge shadow appeared in the darkness. At first it looked like smoke, but as it came closer, it formed a shape. A giant creature made of black mist. Its eyes glowed red. Its breath was cold and heavy. And when it opened its mouth, Heron heard her own voice. Run. Run away. You can't do this. You're nothing. Heron covered her ears. Stop it. The monster roared. The canyon shook. Lumo shouted. Heron, if you run, it will grow bigger. Fear grows when you run from it. Then what do? You face it. You speak the truth. You accept your fear. Heron looked at the monster. Inside its swirling body, she saw memories. The day she felt alone at school. The time her friend ignored her. The moment she wanted to speak but stayed quiet. The night she cried into her pillow. The words she told herself. I'm nothing. Her chest hurt. She took a step forward. I am scared. The monster stopped. I'm scared of being hurt. I'm scared of being alone. I'm scared of failing. The monster's body shook. But even if I'm scared, I still want to move forward. The red in the monster's eyes flickered. I came all the way here. I didn't run. I'm scared, but I'm still here. The monster let out a long, low cry. Its body began to break apart, turning into black smoke. Lumo shouted, Heron, look. Where the monster had stood, a small red flame floated in the air. Heron reached out and took it. It was warm, not burning, just warm enough to make her heart feel steady. This is courage. Lumo smiled.
Yes.
You found it by facing your fear. Heron held the flame close. Her hands were still shaking, but her heart felt stronger. What now? Now, Lumo said, we go east, to the place where joy is waiting. Heron looked back at the dark canyon. Then she turned forward. Her steps were still small, but they were steady, and the flame of courage glowed softly in her hands. After leaving the Shadow Canyon, the air around Heron slowly changed again. The cold, heavy feeling from the canyon faded little by little, and a soft, warm breeze brushed against her cheek. The breeze felt like a gentle hand patting her head, a touch she had not felt in a long time. Heron held the flame of courage close to her chest. The small red flame beat like a tiny heart, sending warmth into her hands. Every time it pulsed, Heron felt a little stronger than before. Lumo, where are we going now? She asked. To the east, Lumo said. To the place where joy lives. The lake of laughter. Laughter? The word felt strange on Heron's tongue. She tried to remember the last time she had laughed freely, but nothing came to mind right away. As they walked, the forest began to brighten. The trees here had soft pink leaves that swayed gently, even though there was no wind. The ground sparkled with tiny lights that jumped like small fireflies. Some of the lights floated up and circled around Heron's feet, as if welcoming her. It's beautiful, Heron whispered. The heaviness from the canyon slowly melted away. Her shoulders relaxed without her noticing. And then, they reached the lake. Heron stopped walking. The Lake of Laughter was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. The water was clear and bright, shining with silver and blue light. Small glowing orbs floated above the surface, each one making a soft, ringing sound, like tiny bells or gentle giggles. Heron stepped closer. When the water touched her shoes, a warm feeling spread through her body. Is this the Lake of Laughter? She asked. Lumo nodded. Yes. All the laughter children have shared in the world gathers here. Joy stays here in its purest form. Heron watched the glowing orbs drift across the water. They moved slowly, as if they were alive. Then something strange happened. The orbs began to gather around her. They floated in circles, and soft voices came from them. Do you remember? You laughed so much that day. You were so happy. Your smile was so bright. Heron's eyes widened. What are these voices? They are your forgotten laughs, Lumo said. Joy never disappears. It only hides when your heart becomes tired. Heron looked into the lake. The water rippled gently, and images appeared on the surface. She saw herself as a little girl, running with her friends in a playground. She saw her mother laughing while baking a cake with her. She saw herself dancing in the rain, shouting happily as water splashed everywhere. She saw her father lifting her onto his shoulders, so she could see the stars better. She saw her grandmother telling stories, while Heron laughed until her stomach hurt. All those moments, all those laughs, she had forgotten them. Her eyes grew warm. I really had moments like these. Of course, Lumo said. Joy has always been inside you. You just couldn't see it for a while. Suddenly, the lake trembled. The glowing orbs scattered. The water darkened. A shadow rose from the bottom of the lake. Heron stepped back. What is that? Lumo's voice became tense. That is the one who stole your joy. The shadow of emptiness. The shadow rose higher. It had no clear shape, just a dark, empty form with long arms. That reached toward Heron. A cold voice came from it. Joy is useless. Laughter disappears. Joy only hurts you later. Forget it, forget everything. Heron felt her chest tighten. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. Lumo, do I have to fight it? No, Lumo said firmly. Joy cannot be won by fighting. Joy returns when you remember it. Remember?
Yes.
Think of the moments that made you smile. Feel them again. Heron closed her eyes. She thought of her mother's warm hands, her father's laugh, her grandmother's stories, her friends calling her name, the sound of rain, the smell of cake, the feeling of running barefoot on grass. Warmth filled her chest. A soft light grew inside her. The shadow stepped back. Stop. Stop remembering. Joy makes me weak. Heron opened her eyes. Her whole body was glowing with golden light. Joy didn't disappear, she said softly. It was always here. The light burst outward. It spread across the lake, washing over the shadow. The shadow let out a long, empty cry, before breaking apart into thin smoke. When the light faded, a small yellow flame floated above the lake. Lumo smiled. That is the second feeling, the flame of joy. Heron reached out and took it. The flame was warm and light, like a tiny laugh resting in her hand. Now I have two, she said. Yes, Lumo replied. But the last one, sadness, is the deepest of all. Heron felt a small weight in her chest. Even with joy in her hands, she felt something heavy waiting ahead. Let's go, she said quietly. I'm ready. She held both flames close and walked toward the next part of the forest, the place where sadness lived. As Heron and Lumo walked away from the lake of joy, the forest changed again. This time, it did not grow brighter or darker. It simply became quiet. So quiet that Heron could hear her own breathing clearly. There was no wind, no glowing lights, no soft sounds. It felt as if the whole forest was holding its breath. Heron held the flames of courage and joy close to her chest. They still glowed warmly, but in this place, even their warmth felt muted, as if something heavy was pressing down on them. Lumo, why is it so quiet here? Heron whispered. Lumo's shadowy body trembled slightly. This is the forest of sadness. It is where the deepest and heaviest feelings gather. Sadness is this quiet? Sadness doesn't shout, Lumo said softly. It sits deep inside the heart. It waits. It weighs you down. It makes the world feel still. Heron swallowed. She understood that feeling more than she wanted to admit. The trees in this part of the forest were dark blue and tall. Their branches drooped low, and drops of water clung to the bark. But it wasn't rain. It wasn't dew. It looked like the trees were crying. The ground was wet, and small puddles were scattered everywhere. When Heron stepped closer to one, the surface rippled gently. She knelt down and looked into the puddle. Her breath caught in her throat. Inside the water were tears. Not just water, but the tears of children. Small faces appeared in the reflection. Crying faces. Lonely faces. Faces full of hurt that no one had noticed. Heron's chest tightened painfully. What is this?" she asked. "These are tears that were never seen," Lumo said. "Tears that fell when no one was there to listen. Tears that were hidden." Heron looked again. There were so many puddles. So many tears. "So many kids cried alone," she whispered. "Sadness is everywhere," Lumo said. "But many children hide it. They think sadness makes them weak." Heron stared into the puddle again, and suddenly, she saw herself, a younger Heron, crying quietly into her pillow. Heron sitting alone in a classroom, trying not to show she was hurt. Heron walking home with her head down, pretending she was fine. Her own tears filled the puddle. "That's me," Heron whispered. Yes, Lumo said. The forest of sadness shows you the sadness you tried to hide. Heron wanted to look away, but she couldn't. The reflection felt too real, too honest. I didn't know I cried this much. You cried, Lumo said gently, but you didn't tell anyone. Heron bit her lip. She couldn't deny it. As they walked deeper into the forest, the air grew heavier. It felt like invisible hands were pressing down on her shoulders. Her steps became slower.
Then,
The ground shook. Heron gasped and stepped back. Lumo, what was that? Lumo's voice was tense. When sadness is denied, it becomes a monster. The ground cracked open. Black roots shot out, twisting and curling like living snakes. They wrapped around Heron's ankles. Ah! Heron cried out. She tried to pull away, but the roots tightened. The ground split wider, and a huge shadow rose from below. It was not like the monster in the canyon. It did not roar. It did not move fast. It simply stood there, heavy, dark, and silent. But its presence made Heron's chest ache. The shadow opened its mouth. Don't cry. Don't show it. Sadness is weakness. Hide it. Hide everything. The voice was low and trembling. It sounded like a voice that had been hurt for a long time. Heron froze. That voice. I've heard it before. Lumo nodded sadly. It is the voice you used on yourself. Heron's eyes widened. The monster stepped closer. Its body was made of dark water. And inside it, Heron saw memories. The day she felt left out. The moment a friend's words hurt her. The night she cried alone. The times she said, "It's fine," even when it wasn't. Her heart ached. Lumo shouted, "Heron, sadness doesn't disappear when you hide it. You must accept it. But if I cry, doesn't that make me weak?" "No," Lumo said firmly. "Crying means you can feel. Feeling means you are alive." Heron looked at the monster. Its body rippled like a pool of dark water. She took a shaky breath. I was really hurt. The monster stopped moving. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to bother anyone. The monster trembled. I felt lonely. I felt small. I felt like no one saw me. A tear rolled down Heron's cheek. The tear fell to the ground, and the moment it touched the soil, a tiny seed appeared. Lumo whispered, "That is the seed of sadness." The monster looked at the seed. Its heavy body lowered slowly. "Sadness is not wrong," Heron said softly. "It's a part of me, and that's okay." The monster's body began to melt. The dark water faded into the ground, leaving only a soft blue light behind. A small blue flame floated up from the spot. Lumo smiled gently. "That is the last feeling, the flame of sadness." Heron reached out and took it. The flame was cool and calm, like a quiet night sky. "I have all three now," she whispered. "Yes," Lumo said, "but the final place, the heart of feelings, is waiting." Heron held the three flames close. Courage,
joy,
sadness. And she walked toward the end of the forest, toward the truth she still had to face. After leaving the forest of sadness, the path ahead opened wider than before. It felt different from every other part of the forest. There was no bright light, but it wasn't dark either. Instead, the air itself seemed to glow softly, as if the space was made of quiet light. Heron held the three flames, courage, joy, and sadness, close to her chest. They floated gently above her hands, each one shining with its own color. The red flame was warm and steady. The yellow flame was light and playful, and the blue flame was calm and deep. "Lumo, is this really the last place?" Heron asked. Lumo nodded. Its shadowy body looked clearer than before, as if the forest's healing was affecting it too.
yes.
"This is the final place, the heart of feelings." Heron took a deep breath. Her steps felt heavier now, not because she was tired, but because she knew something important was waiting. At the end of the path stood a giant door. It wasn't made of wood or stone. It looked like it was made of flowing light and shadow mixed together. The bright parts were warm and soft, while the dark parts were cool and sharp. They moved together like two sides of the same heartbeat. As Heron approached, the door slowly opened on its own. Inside was a space unlike anything she had seen before. The sky above was filled with stars that moved like living creatures. The ground shimmered like gentle waves of light, and every step Heron took made small ripples spread out beneath her feet. In the center of the space floated a huge crystal sphere, the heart of feelings. But it was still gray, still cold, still empty. Heron stepped closer. The air around the sphere felt icy, as if it had been frozen for a very long time. "Do I just put the flames inside?" she asked. "Yes," Lumo said quietly. "But be careful."
Why?
Lumo didn't answer. Its eyes looked worried. Heron lifted her hands. The three flames rose into the air, spinning slowly above the gray sphere. Then they sank into it. The sphere began to glow faintly. A soft pulse, a weak heartbeat. But then, the entire space shook. A burst of black light exploded from the sphere, swirling around Heron like a storm. "Lumo!" Heron cried. Lumo tried to reach her, but the black light pushed it back. The swirling darkness gathered in front of Heron, twisting and pulling itself into a shape. A human shape. Heron froze. Standing in front of her was herself, but not the Heron she knew. This Heron had empty eyes, a face full of sadness and anger, and a body made of shifting shadows. The shadow Heron opened her mouth. "Why are you trying to fix everything now?" Her voice was Heron's voice, but deeper, colder, heavier. "You ignored me for so long. You pushed me away. You pretended I didn't exist." Heron stepped back. Who are you?" The shadow laughed softly. "You know who I am. I'm you. The part of you that you didn't want to see. Your fear. Your anger. Your loneliness. Your real feelings." Heron's hands trembled. I didn't mean to ignore you." "Yes, you did," the shadow said. "You said you were fine. You said nothing was wrong. You hid me. You locked me away." Heron felt her throat tighten. "I just didn't want to bother anyone." The shadow stepped closer. With every step, the ground darkened. "You think you found courage? You think you found joy? You think you accepted sadness?" The shadow's face twisted. "But if you don't accept me, none of it is real." Heron's breath shook. "Are you really a part of me?" The shadow nodded slowly. "I am the part you hated, the part you were ashamed of, the part you tried to erase." Heron felt tears gather in her eyes. "Then, what am I supposed to do?" The shadow's voice softened for the first time. "Don't hate me." Those words hit Heron's heart like a stone dropped into water. She took a step forward. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." The shadow's eyes widened. "I didn't want to throw you away," Heron said. "I was just scared. Everything hurt. I didn't know what to do." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I didn't want to see you because you reminded me of all the things I couldn't handle." The shadow trembled. Heron took another step, then another. "You are me," she said softly. "And I'm you. I can't be whole without you." She reached out her arms. The shadow tried to pull away at first, but Heron wrapped her arms around it. The shadow shook violently. Then slowly, it began to cry. Why are you hugging me?" it whispered. "Because you're a part of me," Heron said. "And I won't ignore you anymore." The shadow's body began to glow. The darkness melted away, turning into soft silver light. The light drifted toward the heart of feelings and sank into it. The sphere burst into bright color, red, yellow, blue, all swirling together into a warm, living glow. The entire space lit up. Lumo ran to Heron's side. "Heron,
You did it.
the heart of feelings is alive again." Heron closed her eyes. She felt warm,
Whole. Complete.
For the first time, she felt like every part of her, the brave parts, the happy parts, the sad parts, and even the shadow, were all together. When the heart of feelings awakened, the entire forest shook as if it were taking a long, deep breath after years of sleep. It felt like a giant creature opening its eyes for the first time in a very long time. The gray trees around Heron slowly regained their colors. The dull bark brightened into warm browns and greens. The branches lifted themselves as if stretching after a long rest. Leaves that had fallen off began to glow and float back into place, shining with silver, pink, and soft blue light. The ground, once cracked and lifeless, filled with warm light that spread like water. The cracks closed, and tiny sprouts pushed their way up through the soil. Sprouts made from children's feelings returning to life. Heron watched all of it with wide eyes. Her heart felt warm, as if the forest's healing was happening inside her too. "Lumo, we really did it," she whispered. Lumo stood beside her, its shadowy body now brighter and more solid than ever before. "Yes, Heron," Lumo said softly. "You saved the forest." Heron smiled, but there was a small sadness in her eyes. "So, does this mean I have to go back now?" Lumo didn't answer right away. It looked at Heron with gentle eyes. "All children must return to their world," Lumo said. "But you won't go back as the same Heron who came here." Heron looked down at her hands. She could still feel the warmth of the three flames: courage, joy, and sadness, even though they had already become part of the heart of feelings. "Will I remember everything?" she asked quietly. "Feelings never disappear," Lumo said. "You may forget the details, but the courage you found, the joy you remembered, and the sadness you accepted, they will stay with you forever." Heron's eyes grew warm. "Lumo, thank you. For everything." Lumo smiled softly. "No, Heron. Thank you. You faced your fear. You remembered your joy. You accepted your sadness. You healed the forest. And yourself." Just then, a small purple light floated down from the sky. It was the same star that had brought Heron here. The star landed gently in her hands, glowing softly. "It's time," Lumo said. Heron held the star close. Her heart felt full of warmth, full of light, full of feelings she had once tried to hide. "Lumo, will I ever see you again?" Lumo nodded. "As long as you don't forget who you are, the star forest will always be here, and I will always be waiting." Heron's body began to glow. The light wrapped around her like a warm blanket. The forest wind whispered softly around her. "Goodbye, Heron. Thank you. Come back someday." And Lumo's voice rose above them all. "You are a shining child." Heron opened her eyes. She was back in her room. Morning sunlight spilled through the window, painting the floor with soft gold. For a moment, she wondered if everything had been a dream, but then she looked at her hand. A tiny purple star rested in her palm, glowing faintly. Heron smiled. It was real. She walked to the window and opened it. The morning air was cool and fresh. High in the sky, a small purple star twinkled softly, even in daylight. Heron whispered, "Thank you, Lumo." A warm feeling spread through her chest, not from magic, but from something inside her. Courage,
Joy.
sadness. All of them were part of her now. She took a deep breath. "Today, I'll live as the new me." The purple star sparkled, as if answering her, and the day began.